Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us here today. Today, we're going to actually focus on how to leverage analytics to produce smarter marketing data. And with us, we actually have Dave Kelly, who is the CEO of AnalyticsIQ. I'm really looking forward to this session. And as you're joining, if you're joining us live, I really want to let you know that we're going to take questions and we're going to answer them throughout the session. There's no, let's hold off until the end of the conversation to take your questions. So if you've got questions as you're joining, go ahead and ask them. We'll try to get through as many as we can. Let's go ahead and have this engaging and fun conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Dave Kelly. And as you're joining, also let us know where you're tuning in from. That's always interesting to see. All right. Hello, Dave. How's it going?
Fine, Kate. Good morning.
Welcome to the Dedicated Show. Very excited to have you here and excited to learn all about AnalyticsIQ and how we can use analytics to really use data in a smarter fashion.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I think as we kick off, maybe tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who is Dave Kelly?
Well, I'm just a regular guy. I just happen to have been in the analytics business for 30 years now, which seems kind of crazy and really lucky, or at least for me, because I love it and I found my way into this space somehow. And I started my current company 15 years ago with the mission of taking a scientific approach to producing marketing data.
Thanks for that. So you mentioned scientific approach. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, so everything we do, we validate, so if we predict that a consumer owns a cat, we actually try to make sure that it's the best prediction it can be, and we validate it at the end. And well, that sounds pretty basic. That wasn't always how things were, at least when I got into the business.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit more about that. How were things when you were just getting into the business? And I guess that was 15 years ago, right? When you started the company?
That's right. The standard term for marketing data, or at least companies that produce marketing data, is compilers. So if you kind of look at that word on its face, it implies that it's compilation rather than anything analytically or empirical. So compilation typically meant if you're looking at someone's age, you go out and say, okay, what does everyone have? You pull it together in a data set. And while that is important, you always want as much known data as you can get. When you look, in our case, at the US market with 200 million US adults, you can't know everything about everybody. There are a lot of things you need to predict. And we've also focused on things you can't know about everybody, that you can only predict.
What are some things that you can't know about everybody?
Well, you can't know someone's motivations, for example. It's possible that someone knows everyone's gender or ethnicity, but you can't, as a marketer, know people's motivations. You can only predict them. And that's been a focus of ours for the last 5 years or so.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. And we're already getting quite a few people saying hello. We've got somebody from Canada. Hi, Kathleen. Thanks for tuning in. LinkedIn user. I recently just changed my settings, so I don't come up as LinkedIn user anymore. I guess this person has their privacy settings on. I know how to turn them off now if you want to message me. Ayush here from Mumbai. Hello, how's it going? Michelle from Orlando, Alberto. And we already have our first question here from Ayush. He's focusing here on the skills required to be a marketing analyst. And is it more marketing or more analytics in your perspective?
Okay, good questions. To be a marketing analyst, in our perspective, it typically means some kind of STEM degree. So, some scientific or math-related degree. And we've found typically people coming out of college with some background like that actually can be successful in this space with the right training. And in terms of what we do, is it more marketing or more analytics? I would argue it's more analytics. We we make money by focusing our analytics on marketing. But, from my perspective, it's analytics. We produce mathematical formulas, actually fairly complex mathematical formulas. So I would say it's more analytics.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know the topic of the day is, how do we leverage analytics to produce smarter marketing data? So I think it makes sense for a quick definition. And how do you view smarter marketing data?
Well, from my perspective, it's evolving and learning as you go, and I think this goes for any business. You make mistakes along the way, you learn from them, you improve. And in our case, our business is essentially collecting data that we know about a small group of people and projecting this information out to the entire universe. So knowing things about a small group of people, we found the hard way isn't as simple as it seems. It's really simple if you're asking a question like, do you play tennis? Where, people know whether they play tennis or not. That's pretty simple. Or, do you have a dog? But when you get into much more complex things around motivations, like why people do things, what is someone's motivation for donating to a charity? Those are really complex things. And in that case, we've actually engaged with PhD cognitive psychologists, and we have several on staff now because it's above my pay grade. And what we found is it's super important to really know the right things about this small group of people before we take math and clone it out to the entire universe.
That's very interesting. So you mentioned you're working with cognitive psychologists. Are there other companies that are doing similar things? Because I haven't heard of that before.
Well, I think they are, but perhaps not exactly in what we're doing. So, understanding individuals' motivations is extremely important. I think large companies are starting to do that. In producing marketing data, I don't know that I've come across anyone else who's doing that at this point.
Very, very interesting. And so you defined kind of the way we look at marketing and smarter data. How exactly and who exactly does analytics help, and how do they do it with actually getting that data or getting access to that data?
So who we help, or I would say our clients, who typically are consumer product companies, insurance companies, entities like that. And in a typical month, about 1,000 different companies purchase our data, typically for online targeting, but there are other applications also. And fundamentally, I believe most companies want to understand their prospects and customers better. And I think that creates a better experience for consumers also. So if you think about it, if you don't have a baby, is it really important to you to see diaper ads? Or if you don't have a cat, to see cat litter ads? So we think it creates a better experience for everybody the more everybody understands each other.
Yes, you're reminding me of that. I think it was the Target incident, right, where the company knew before the actual parents of the teenager who was expecting a child, and they were sending the targeted ads. I'm not sure if you. Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard that story. It was I don't
think I know about that one. Well, what we try to emphasize is we're only predicting things. We don't know things.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And Kristen's here. Hi, Kristen. She absolutely agrees with you. Know the right things about a small group of people. Absolutely. I feel like once you know a small group of people, it's not that difficult to kind of make better predictions about the larger group. I noticed that every time I ran any sort of poll or survey, if the answers in the first hour, showed that category A was going to win, almost 99%, almost 100% of the time, category A was going to win even a month later after continuously people kept voting. Right. And I always found that to be so fascinating. Well, I know, the sample and the population and all that statistics, but it's so true. I just love to see it happen every single time. We had another question here from Alberto, and he's asking, how do you measure a successful marketing campaign with data or KPIs in the business?
Well, one thing I like about the new digital world is there's an immediate feedback loop. So most users of our data, they understand whether campaigns work or not because it's pretty immediate. And that, I believe, has always been good for us. I think it explains our pretty explosive growth in our business, especially in the digital world. In the traditional, what I would call world, which is still around, which is like direct mail targeting, it's a much longer process to understand whether something actually worked or not. And in some ways is a little bit more vague because there could always be other seasonal issues or something else happening. But with the modern world and digital targeting, I would probably say most of our clients or users of our data understand whether something worked or not pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of pretty quickly, are you able to put any timeframes or share examples on that?
Well, my understanding is if you did do a digital campaign, I mean, these days there's a really rapid feedback loop. So let's just call it probably hours, not days. So, you put it out there, if people clicked or not. And especially the larger, more sophisticated companies have very rapid feedback.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, it's just real time, right? Like if I send an email to my email list, I can literally watch Google Analytics light up as people click links and go to websites. So it's for the most part, I guess it's real time. In some cases, you do have hours or maybe a couple of days at the most. That's interesting. All right, moving on. Kristen is clarifying that Target example. They mailed her some advertisements because she bought forward accents. So that's.
I have to look into that. I don't know that story.
Yes, and now with everything tracked, right? You use your credit card, and everything is just. It's a lot easier, I think, to target.
It is.
Yeah. Question here from Ayush. Can you please share any blogs, resources, maybe something on AnalyticsIQ that they can use to become better at marketing analytics?
Well, one thing, and I would imagine we were going to talk about this later, is we do have a data set that we'll let anybody download so they can get their hands on our data, and it's real data. And, I feel like real data is always much better to play with as an analyst. So, I would encourage anybody who's interested, to go to our website and download the data. And we love feedback from data scientists, who've looked at our data, and if they have any insights, we're always super interested in hearing.
Yes, I was actually just about to, I pulled up the link, and I'm going to share that link of your free data that you're sharing with the audience today in the comments. If you want to just tell the audience a little bit more about the data, that would be really helpful. I'll just add the link.
Sure. And I understand it's about 50 fields. In reality, we have around 1,500 fields. A field being an individual thing that we're predicting, such as, do you own a cat, or are you married, and things like that. But we've chosen 50 that we think are representative, that can kind of highlight, the data and what it looks like. And, again, we've always been big fans of having smart people, put their hands on our data. So.
Okay, yeah, excellent. And I always receive questions from people who are trying to either get into data analytics or data visualization. Mm-hmm. They're always looking for a data set to play with, a data set to visualize, mm-hmm. analyze. Would you recommend this data set for people just wanting to get their hands on a good data set to either learn how to work with data or maybe build some sort of project or portfolio?
Right. Well, it's a pretty limited data set. So, but I would say is certainly could be a good starting point to at least understand what it looks like. And I will add, we're partnering with a number of universities now to provide full data sets for, aspiring data scientists to leverage, in their academic work. Because again, we've just always found for us, it's great when people actually get to look at our data and use it. So, and I think, I don't have the list of universities, but I believe we're up to around 10 now that we provide this data. So.
Oh, great. So any students from those 10 or so universities can get their hands on the full data set and
Correct.
Start playing.
That's
Very
right.
nice. Awesome. Great. Okay, ready for more questions?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So here's one from Michael. Can you describe how to match third-party data in the online environment, especially since cookies are on the way out? I wasn't aware that they're on the way out. I get asked about cookies everywhere.
That is the assumption. I think it has to do with the different changes in browsers. And while they're on their way out, I'd still say they're a very big thing now. So we an identity graph, which is sort of the industry term for having the ability to connect offline data to online data, is really important. And fundamentally, our data lives where people live. So, Dave Kelly, 123 Main Street, that's what our data looks like. Fundamentally, we connect it through onboarding partners. There are companies that just specialize in taking name and address data, looking, using emails, looking mobile IDs, television IDs, other things to connect all this data. So we partner with, right now, 2 different companies that do that. And certainly we're aware of what's going on in the world and highly motivated to make sure our data can stay connected. And I'm pretty confident that that's not going to interrupt our business, even if we do find 3-4 years from now that cookies are just a thing of the past.
Yeah, I feel like things will always evolve into something else. We just kind of have to keep up with the trends. I know GDPR is now limiting a lot of the data use, and as you mentioned, connecting online and offline records to build those identity graphs. I wanted to ask, since you're so knee deep in this space, what are some other obstacles that companies or people are facing when they're trying to work with data in the marketing space?
That's a good question. So, privacy is a paramount concern these days. And, respecting privacy always has to be the forefront of anything that you look at around marketing data. And I've always felt like we've always tried, we have been on the right side of it. And none of our data comes from, for example, scraping from the internet and things that perhaps could be questioned by a lot of people around, respecting privacy. But otherwise, like you said, when there are opportunities, when there's market demand, somehow things flow. And so, in our case, we, have always managed to evolve with the industry and with the market needs. So I don't know if I answered your question, by the way. I feel like I got off track there.
No, you're all good. I made a note to myself, and my handwriting is so bad that I honestly can't read my notes. I was teaching my first grader proper handwriting, and she actually made a comment. She's like, but I can't even understand your handwriting. I'm like, yes, thank you. Yeah, so I guess we can take this question here while I try to decipher my own writing. From Rifumo, he's asking, does the analytics space only involve individuals with math background? Because he heard you say that you involve psychologists to assist with certain reasons, related to individuals' motivations.
Yeah, good question. So our company has a diverse group of skill sets. We have data scientists who I would say typically have a math background. So when you think about taking data and modeling out the universe, those are typically mathematicians or data scientists. We have cognitive psychologists who help us collect the data, ask the right questions. That's another skill set. And then certainly we also have accountants and other, types, salespeople who help drive the business and help us stay organized. But if you look at the boots on the ground, as I would say, it's mathematicians and cognitive psychologists.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And as you answered that, I remember the question I wanted to ask is, you mentioned that you don't do any web scraping off the internet. So my question to that was going to be, what are your main sources of data collection?
So fundamentally, we use just public data. So in the United States, that consists of like census data, for example, public record data. So, when you buy a home in the United States, it's now public record where you paid for it and some other details. So this public information fundamentally is what we use as inputs. And it's an iterative process. So being at this 15 years, you model something like whether someone owns a cat. Well, that model helps you build other things that aren't even related to owning a cat in the future, because now we know something about an individual. So having been at this that long, underneath it all is public data, but all these predictions we made over the years help us do other things better as we go along. So even predicting someone's motivations helps us model perhaps, our next predictor, whether someone owns a cat, will be better because we have predicted, how they donate money, for example.
You've mentioned cat quite frequently. So now I have to ask, do you have a cat or multiple cats?
Not multiple cats. I'm not a cat person, but I do have one cat actually. And he's sitting in the chair over here. So that's sort of.
Okay, so maybe he's top of mind. I have a cat too. I actually have to lock my door so she doesn't come in, because the cat walking by is, might be distracting. But just wanted to ask, since you brought up cats for for most of the examples, I had to clarify.
Well, I usually use that as an example because it's sort of a very clear thing. Other things we do are less clear. So I always use that one because it's like, okay, it's a fact whether you own a cat or not.
Yeah, easy to relate to. Exactly, absolutely. Okay, great. So question here from Wafa. How do you quantify human behavior? What variables do you use to represent personalities?
So a great question. And again, I'm not a cognitive psychologist, but I've been fortunate enough to partner with some. So when you think about motivation and what's inside, we've learned as we go to treat it very similar to a personality test. And I think a lot of us have taken those tests at some point. Like there's the Big 16, I think, which is, whether you're, well, actually, I forget the description, but whether you're introverted or extroverted, and those sort of things. So if you're familiar with those kinds of tests, typically you'll see the same question multiple times asked different ways, and that's fundamentally how you get at things about people that often they don't even know about themselves. So before I took a personality test, I couldn't have told you what my personality was. I didn't know. Very similar when we're predicting whether someone is extrinsically motivated to donate money, meaning they want the attention related to donating money, or intrinsically motivated, meaning they would only donate money if no one found out. Something like that, typically you get at that by asking questions a lot of different ways. You throw out, I'll use the word deceptive. It's not always intentional deception, but it's at least not consistent answers. Mm-hmm. And that's fundamentally how we try to get a pure data set. But again, the best way I could describe it is it's very similar to the way personality testing is done, where you ask a lot of peripheral questions, you in a way model that data at the end. It's handed off to our data scientists who go, okay, thanks for modeling that. Now we can clone it to our entire universe.
Yeah, I think it's the Myers-Briggs test. Is that when you were one of those? I had to take quite a bit of those personality tests earlier in my career. When you're joining a big firm, they want to know, what kind of person are you? Do you want to work in a team or work by yourself? And I remember 5 of the questions were worded slightly different. I'm like, how many times are they going to ask me the same thing? I already told them, like, yes, I like to do this, or, I prefer to work this way. But I guess that's the only way you can actually get to the bottom of the motivations and the personalities, because we can say, oh yeah, I'm social or I'm extroverted, and then
Right.
put you in a situation and you're kind of shy playing with your phone, then maybe you're not as social as you thought you were. And I think those questions can determine that better than you can determine yourself.
I agree, and I think we often have myths about ourselves,
Yeah.
and so breaking that down is sometimes difficult because our goal is to understand, the people that we're surveying the best we can. So, like I said, to do that, it does involve some deep psychology.
Yeah. I guess that's why you have the cognitive psychologist on board for that.
Correct.
Great. All right. Going on to Archita. She says, hey, Dave, could you give us an insight on how complex it is to choose a small set to represent a population with an example, and what factors come into play while doing so?
So it depends on what we're doing. Sometimes it's not at all complex. Like I said, the first time we built the aforementioned CAP model, that was easy. That's probably something we did before we even, started working with a cognitive psychologist. Pretty simple. And if we were just trying to create what I would call traditional marketing data, I don't know that we would have needed cognitive psychologists, because fundamentally I would call traditional marketing data looks at, in my opinion, what you are, and it's typically things you can't change about yourself or you can't easily change: age, gender, marital status, education, and those are important things, and we have those things, and we do the best job possible with those things. But our focus increasingly has turned to who people are. So it's what's inside, what's their motivation. And we find that this is important to our clients to really understand, why someone, what need does someone have, so that if you're a business, you're essentially in the business of meeting people's needs. So understanding that is typically when it became very complex for us. And that is when we first partnered with a cognitive psychologist, and we determined we needed to bring cognitive psychology in-house, because it gets very complex when you get away from the basics of what somebody is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes so much sense to have them in-house, because then they're, who you're working with, and also they kind of understand your data and can put all that together.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned working with clients, and I just wanted to touch on, how do you actually work with companies? So you mentioned that, I guess, at any point in time within a month, you can have over 1,000 different companies download your data sets. And just curious, do they get to take a peek at what are the variables that are in the data sets, or how does that actually work?
Well, just to be clear, part of our business is digital targeting. So these are these marketplaces where it's totally hands off. Our data is onboarded, it's delivered to one of these large platforms. They work with hundreds or thousands of different companies. And I'm not an expert exactly on how they access our data, but my imagination is that they say, okay, we're targeting, based on these characteristics, and perhaps it's certain age range, certain activities, that they'll say, okay, we want to target based on these particular characteristics. Another way we work with clients, and it's a significant way, is we deliver our data to analytics teams at large companies. So perhaps it's a large insurance company. They'll take a quarterly feed from us as we produce a new file, and they take the entire universe, and they internally build thousands of models, whatever they're trying to predict about their customers or their prospects. So, like I said, bring our data in. They have these teams of data scientists, and so they'll get refreshed data from us. And, we always keep everything we've always created, but we create about 50 new fields a quarter. So they get a chance to look at these new things and whether that can help them predict, things better. So that's typically the two main way that we work with our clients.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. We got Jose here saying, Thanks, Dave. He'd like to see that data set. So I will put the link in the comments again before we wrap up the session, just to make sure if people are just joining right now. There is a data set that AnalyticsIQ is providing that you can go and download for free. Okay, going to go down to a question here I saw from George Firikin. Hello, George. Thanks for joining us here. His question is there a success story from one of your clients that used AnalyticsIQ that you can share with us?
Sure. Thanks, George. And I'll use the same one I used when I was on his program because it's top of mind. We work with a really large nonprofit in the United States, one of the leading children's cancer charities. So it's an important thing for us, not just from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. So we've worked with this client for quite a while. We have had an opportunity to tour their facility, and I would describe it as life-changing in terms of looking at their mission. So it's not selling more toothpaste or more insurance products. It's actually saving children's lives. So for us, it's a very personal and important thing. And we were fortunate enough to work with them initially to help make Facebook work for them in terms of targeting. And when you look at their business, I feel like they have a great message, but they have disparate messages. One message is perhaps the image of a child suffering from cancer, very sad, appeals to everyone. I think everyone can have empathy for that. They also have a message which is how successful they've been in increasing the survival rate for childhood cancer over the years. Both great messages. And one thing that we found is that when you look at what I would call the impulsivity scale or the spectrum, which means everybody is somewhere on the spectrum. So you could be over here, which is extremely conscientious. So really conscientious people need a lot of information. If they're buying a car, they visit a lot of car dealers. They do a lot of research. Impulsive people buy a car from the first car dealership they go to and they drive it and they get attached and, oh, cool, I'm going to buy it. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, and we all fall somewhere on there. And there's no problem wherever someone falls. But if you look at the message from this charity, where the message about the survival rate appeals much more to conscientious people. It's like a fact. It's information. The image of a child suffering from cancer, while it does appeal to everyone, it's much more, or it works better with impulsive people who are more emotionally driven. They have emotional reactions. They act on their emotions. So, I would just say in a real world case study, that is, in our mind at least, how those two things can work. And understanding individuals better and what's inside, that's how it could have an impact on a nonprofit or on a business. So when you really get at what's inside, you can tailor a message to what drives the individual.
Wow, that's a really amazing example that actually saves lives. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I also just realized I'm probably more on the impulsive side, probably with the child and make a donation. So I think that company's listening.
I do too, actually. So yes.
Yes. Okay. There's a question here actually on Facebook. So from Michelle. So it might be relevant. When you consider the Facebook example of gathering data to target advertise, how does this compare? And I guess you were just talking about that as an example as Michelle asked that question, but if you have anything to add.
Well, not really. Facebook has other unique data that can be used that can be highly effective, because it's within their platform and it's based on behavior within Facebook. It stays in that world. However, we believe that our data can add something to that because that data typically is oriented around, again, what someone is. So we feel like our data still has a place there, along with the universe of data that's available within Facebook.
Yeah, and I was actually, I wanted a follow-up question to your example with the Children's Cancer nonprofit. Let's say, so now you know there's a group of people that are on the impulse side and then the conscientious side, and you know which ad to kind of show to each of those groups. On the execution side of things, is it possible to kind of know, like, who am I, for example, on Facebook? Is there a way to link all of that data together to make sure that I get to see that specific ad that will work better for me?
There is. So,
Yes.
it goes through a privacy wall. It's de-identified, but fundamentally, Facebook knows that it's you, right? The advertiser doesn't see your information unless you reach out and become a customer. Not an expert on all things Facebook, but fundamentally in digital targeting, that is the way it works. That's how you protect privacy. So, again, they don't know it's Kate. They just know it's a person with these characteristics whom they want to target an ad. They know it's Kate if you reach out and become a customer.
Okay, that helps to clarify. Thank you. Okay, Jamie here says thank you for the webinar and has a couple of questions. So let's start with question 1. How is it going to change marketing analytics on the web with fewer or no cookies? Again, are people really using less cookies? But anyways, and then which models or analytics techniques are most important to know and master in the field? So maybe let's start with question 1, the prediction of changes of how marketing analytics will change without cookies. And then I'll pull it up.
Well, I wish I knew totally. I would say there are 2 trends, whereas cookies, are at least threatened with demise. It also aligns with the move to mobile, much more iPads, phones, other tablets. So those 2 things are happening together. And while there aren't cookies typically in mobile interactions, there are mobile IDs that are de-identified. So again, I have an iPhone, but you don't necessarily, a marketer doesn't know that it's Dave Kelly. There's a mobile ID, which is not a personal identifier, that can connect data. So those 2 trends are happening at the same time. And if I had to guess, I would say 5 years from now, the incidence of people using their PC is going to continue to decline anyway. But I still think cookies will be around to some extent. Not a total expert on that, but that's what I would guess.
Well, we don't have a crystal ball, right? All you can do is share your thoughts. That's it.
Exactly, and we all kind of have to see what happens.
Yes.
In terms of what to master, be honest with you, the world continues to get more sophisticated. I think, in an academic setting, certainly learning about the traditional ways of predicting, regression, decision trees, things like that, neural networks is important, but also learning about, more about machine learning, about artificial intelligence. I just feel that's a great way to step into the world. But I think one thing that surprises people when they come out of an academic setting to a business is that, well, in a business, we're not, there might be a function which is research and development, and we have that ourselves. Data scientists that come in, we're looking for them to learn our process and use that process. You're certainly open to improvement, but unless you're stepping into an R&D role, probably you're going to use whatever methodology this company has decided best works for their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, we've got Ravit Jain here from PACT saying you are fantastic. That's always a good comment.
Thank you. Wow.
And he also has a question here. So where do you see AnalyticsIQ in the next 3 years? Again, get your crystal ball out, please, and let us know.
Well, we intend to keep growing. Our intention is to hire around 10 or 11 individuals this year. We've already hired a few within this year, maybe 4. And so we continue, we've grown very rapidly. We were fortunate enough even to grow during the pandemic, even though I would say there was a decline overall in marketing data usage during the pandemic. We actually still grew. And we predict rapid growth, and with that, we'll need more data scientists, and we'll need other individuals to help support that growth.
Great. So you're hiring. Is that something people can find on the website if they feel like they're a fit and want to inquire, learn more?
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
AnalyticsIQ, everybody go and check it out. Okay, great. Another question here. What are the common marketing analytics use cases using publicly available data sets? I know we went through a couple of examples, but do you have maybe another example that you can share of marketing analytics use cases?
Well, not really. I mean, to be honest with you, we certainly have white papers, and we have various drawn a blank on the term, but ways that we've shown how our data works in different industries and things like that. Happy to share those things. Mm-hmm. Some of them are more protected, because while we do want people to look at how we do things, we don't always want our competitors to see everything. But having said that, happy to share. And I think some things are just totally available on our website, and other things we ask just for you to sign in. But again, happy to share case studies. That was the term I was looking for.
Oh, case studies. Okay, sorry, I should have helped you with that.
Yeah, I knew it was something really basic.
Great. And Ravit's here again saying that it's lovely to see that AnalyticsIQ is hiring during the pandemic. I know that's, I guess, pretty rare to thrive and to actually hire during this time. I'm going to share my screen for a second to show people basically the landing page, and I'll share that link again of the data set that you're giving away. So your free sample of AnalyticsIQ data is a click away, and here's a little bit about the information. You basically submit your info below, and you get to download their free sample data file as 500 individuals with 50 attributes. That's quite a bit of attributes there. So definitely encourage people to go ahead and check this out. As I mentioned, I will share the link again right now as we wrap up. And Dave, I just wanted to ask, if there's anything else you want to share with the audience, and also let them know where they can go to continue the conversation, if they have more questions that maybe we didn't get to today.
Absolutely. Don't have anything else to add. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. For me personally, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or Dave K at Analytics-IQ is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Always happy to have a conversation.
Okay, great. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me on the Dedicated show today. It was really insightful for me to learn. And thank you so much for those who participated with their comments and questions. I think it always helps make the conversation a lot more engaging when we can answer questions directly from the audience. It's almost as if people are just raising their hand and we're calling on them as we go. So I appreciate everybody that joined and tuned in.
Me too. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Good. You too. Bye-bye.